Hello, and welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG. My name is Pamela Cone, and I'm delighted to serve as the podcast host for this series. We are so fortunate to have with us today Sybille Raphael, the legal director at TedX. TedX is the UK Whistleblowing Charity, and she's going to tell us more about that in a little bit. Welcome, Sybille.
Thank you for having me, Pam.
So let's start with your background and how you ended up at TedX. Tell us about that journey.
I've got a slightly unusual journey because it started in Paris. I'm French, and I started my career as a French avocat, a French lawyer working in a law firm, doing employment law, mostly for employers or companies. So on we call it the respondent side. Then I did an amazing exchange program between the Paris bar and the London bar, and I fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love with a UK barrister. After 2 years of giving money to Eurostar and ferrying back and forth the channel, we decided to get married, and I moved to London.
Mm-hmm.
French employment law was at the time, and I think still is, very different from UK employment law. So I retrained as a UK solicitor, and I even did an LLM in UK employment law, and then started working here in the UK. And I switched side and I crossed the channel. I worked mostly for employees, for workers from we call it the claimant side. So first in a law firm, and then after a while in-house in a charity doing discrimination and parental rights. And for the last 3.5 years, I've been working at TedX as their legal director. So still doing employment law, because whistleblowing is part of employment law in the UK, but more than employment law, because it's also about freedom of expression. It touches on other bits of the law as well.
And you and I were fortunate enough to meet because you and your team were the recipient of the Legal ESG in-house legal team award at the awards dinner in London in June. So tell us about what TedX does and what it means to be the whistleblowing charity for the UK.
Yeah. It's an amazing charity, and I do have an amazing job because I do a little bit of everything that the charity does. I usually say I have the best job in the world, and I really mean it. The charity was set up in '93. It celebrated its 30 years anniversary last year. It was set up to campaign for the UK to adopt a law to protect whistleblowers. The UK did adopt a law protecting whistleblowers 5 years afterwards, job done, which is rather unusual. I take great pride in the fact that the law protecting whistleblowers in the UK is the only piece of employment law, to my knowledge, that had cross-party support, because whistleblowing is good for business. It's not just having whistleblowers' rights. It's not just good for individual workers. It's also good for business, because, of course, you want to know when there are risks. You want your staff to be able to alert you when there are dangers. So it's good for everyone. So the job was done, but no one knew quite how this new law was going to work. And so TedX set up a free advice line for whistleblowers to advise them on how to raise their concern in the most effective, but in also the safest way, and what to do if things went wrong. What were their legal rights if they ended up being dismissed or in some way punished because they blew the whistle to their employer. So the advice line is still very much the sort of the core of the charity. We're unique in the world. We've advised individually more than 50,000 whistleblowers to date. Last year we had more than 3,000 new cases. July has been a very busy month for us. This particular July, we had more than 350 new cases again, just in the month of July. So that's the advice line is very important, and it's a core. We're unusual because we self-fund and we don't receive grants from the UK government. And we do that by selling training and consultancy to organizations who want to set up effective whistleblowing systems. And that's a really virtuous circle because we know intimately why things go wrong, because whistleblowers talk to us every single day, so then they tell us their stories, but also from the very beginning, from the last 30 years, we've worked with organizations who are serious about doing it right, who want to do it right, and who are the most innovative in the field. And so we also know why systems go wrong, or what makes systems better and what makes systems more effective. And we've always retained a very strong policy and campaign arm. We're a very respected voice for the government, but also for regulators. For instance, we helped the financial regulator in the UK, the FCA, to draft their whistleblowing rules. There's, in the UK, if you're a financial institution, you have to set up whistleblowing systems. You have to have a whistleblowers champion, and so on and so forth. So we're also very strong on the policy front. We have a very long draft whistleblowing law, because our current law is 25 years old, and we have lots of ideas on what could be better, and so we have a long list of improvements that could be made. An aspect of my job that I really enjoy, we intervene in important whistleblowing cases as a third-party intervener, and that's quite fun. So in all the most important Court of Appeal or Supreme Court whistleblowing cases, we have been authorized to intervene and to tell the judge our take on a specific aspect of the question, because we bring that sort of broad view on how it's going to impact or affect whistleblowers generally, organizations generally, if the law is interpreted in a particular way. So that's so I do a little bit of everything. I supervise the legal advisors who give legal advice to whistleblowers. I'm closely involved in our policy and campaign work, particularly in our legal interventions. And I also spend an awful lot of my time talking to employers, talking to boards, talking to the whistleblowing functions of big organizations, and that's also very, very satisfying indeed. So a little bit of everything.
So you talked about the volume of, especially on your advice line, the volume increasing so dramatically. Through your time at Protect, or even during the time that Protect has existed, what has changed? What topics are the most prominent?
I think that's also what makes this job so interesting, because we see societies change through our work. So yeah, it's a very good question. What has changed? Well, up until 10 years ago, all we heard about on Protect advice line was patient safety or financial misconduct. Whistleblowing was just that. And now we hear about greenwashing, we hear about anti-trans discrimination. Indeed, since 2017, we've had a 100% increase in the proportion of harassment cases. More and more workers want to raise concerns about toxic workplace culture, bullying, discrimination via whistleblowing channels. And obviously, Me Too and Black Lives Matters helped discover the public interest in claims that up until then were seen as purely individual grievances. So I think that's really interesting, and that shows that we've come a long way from the time when disclosures were less likely to be protected if the whistleblower had a private interest in raising them. I do think whistleblowing is interesting because it tells you what we as a society see as unacceptable misconduct, and not just at a purely individual level, but for the wider community. And so it gives us a pulse of sort of maybe more hidden or less visible trends that that are at play there. So that's really I find that really interesting.
And in my opinion, moving in the right direction, because if historically or a decade ago, the only thing that whistleblowers focused on was financial misconduct or patient safety, and now the realm of potential issues is much broader. It shows exactly what you said, that society perhaps used to accept behaviors that are no longer acceptable.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
And what I think is quite exciting is a link to governance, to accountability. You can't just talk the talk and then say, do what I say and not what I do. You're expected to walk the talk, and if you don't, well, that's a whistleblowing matter in a way.
Yes.
And we definitely say, and I absolutely believe that there is. You can't be serious about transparency. You can't be serious about ESG if you don't have, and you can't be serious about governance, good governance, if you don't have a strong and effective whistleblowing system. If your staff is too scared or too discouraged to report misconduct, then what's the point? Wrongdoers are going to continue to commit wrongdoing in all impunity because they'll know that no one will dare do anything about it. So I think that's quite exciting. The other thing that's quite exciting in my view is the fact that regulators, society as a whole, expect a far more proactive stance on all this. So it used to be the case that, oh yeah, bad apple, this particular manager, yeah, okay, he was a predator. He was sexually harassing all the female members of his team. But it was just a bad apple. We've dealt with him. We've disciplined him. We've dismissed him. So look, seem to approach ourselves. No, that's not enough. Now you can't be a basket of apple where the bad apple will feel free to be a bad apple. Basically, you need to be proactive about that. You need to ensure that there is a culture within your organization that will mean that no one will dare being the bad apple. It's just will be inconceivable to engage in that sort of behavior. And that sort of requirement to be proactive, I think, is quite interesting. And it's also a requirement to be proactive in addressing whistleblowers' victimization, which is so important. Because what people forget is that if you report a problem, well, it's never nice for anyone who receives the problem. I don't like it when someone comes to me and says, "Hey, there's a problem in your team." I love my team. I recruited them, I trained them, I trust them. So it's very tempting to be defensive and to say, there's no problem in my team. You're the problem. Whistleblowers victimization is our sort of default mode. So it's really, really important to sort of be aware of it and address it quickly. Whistleblowers are going to upset people. It's inherent in what whistleblowing is. Reporting a problem means some people are going to be upset about it. So it's also quite exciting for me to see how regulators now expect employers, companies to be much more proactive in how they address victimization and whistleblowers victimization in particular. And it's also quite exciting to see the debate shift on NDAs, where the whole ideas about, confidentiality, fine, but we need to, we can't report wrongdoing, or it needs to stay confidential, and so on and so forth. There's been a lot of movement in that as well, obviously post Me Too, and it's still continuing. Yes, confidentiality is good and is necessary in some cases, but certainly why should NDAs be routine? And what NDAs should never do is prevent someone from raising a whistleblowing concern. So, for instance, from going to the regulator and reporting the particular issue. So it's I think that's also really interesting and yeah, really topical.
So I had the privilege of listening to your TEDx talk earlier this week, and I encourage all of our listeners to do so as well. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight: Whistleblowing in the Digital Age. Does technology make it easier for whistleblowers to report or more challenging? And what role does social media play?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm going to give you the lawyer's answer. A little bit of everything. Yes, technology can make it easier to report wrongdoing. An awful lot of big companies now have outsourced platforms, outsourced reporting lines, and you can set up systems where you don't have to leave an email address. You can just enter into a website and report something without having to sort of disclose your identity. So that's it's potentially a good thing. I believe it's important to allow for anonymous reporting of whistleblowing concerns, because in some cases, your staff is going to be so scared about the whole thing that they won't want to give away their identity, and of course you still want to know about the issues. So for that, technology is a good thing, but technology can be used both ways, and we also believe it could be used to sort of track who the whistleblower was, maybe look at how they formulated their disclosure, looked at their use of language. And I'm pretty sure that AI now will be able to sort of, analyze my way of speaking, my way of writing, and to be able to say, oh, that email has probably been written by Sybille because of the way she uses her comma or whatever.
Right.
So I think technology could also lead to a risk in allowing the identification of whistleblowers, which maybe 10 years ago wasn't there. So what's also interesting is sort of the hidden wrongdoing. In my TED talk, I talk about the post office scandal, and in the UK it's been a massive issue, the biggest miscarriage of justice in recent history. The problem was hidden. The problem was a problem in the software. It was very, very difficult for the victims to identify where the problem was, because when you're not a software engineer, how are you going to be able to discover that actually it's not you who's made any anything wrong? It's actually the software who's gone mad. And it's going to be even harder if you're a sub postmaster saying, no, I didn't steal anything, it's a computer who went mad. Who's going to believe you if you say that? So I think technology can make it harder, and so it's not it's not black and white in any way.
In your opinion, what works best for a company that wants to ensure that their employees feel comfortable with the whistleblowing process? Is it a carrot? Is it an incentive? Is it a stick? What makes that the right environment?
Yeah, I think you need a bit of both. You definitely need the carrot. You definitely need to encourage and to reward responsible whistleblowing. You definitely need to tell your staff, hey, we want to hear about issues. we want to hear when things go wrong, but much rather that you go to us rather than post something on social media or, go external. Please tell us when things go wrong. We want to improve. And you need to show that you value that. And so I always said the most important words when you have a conversation with a whistleblower is thank you. You've done the right thing. You've brought your concerns to us. Thank you. It's very likely that the whistleblower will only have a tiny angle on the whole issue. It's very likely that the whistleblower will only see tiny bit of a whole problem, and it's very possible that there will be a very innocent explanation to what the whistleblower thinks is potentially a very worrying problem. But you want to hear about their perceptions, because potentially, actually, there is no innocent explanation, and you won't know about the wrongdoing unless they tell you about it. So even if the whistleblower is mistaken, especially in the way if the whistleblower is mistaken, you want to thank them and to tell them you've done the right thing. And you've told me that. So I think rewarding the whistleblower in that way is very important. I'm always asked, should the UK government or should the UK regulators financially reward whistleblowers? I think that's a sort of different question in a way. It's potentially very useful for the regulators themselves, because it may mean that they can investigate more easily, because if there's money, it means that the whistleblowers can go to lawyers and we can do part of the investigations and we can present a case more easily, so it's easier to prosecute and so forth. It's I don't really believe it's rewards, offering financial rewards to whistleblowers will actually be a game changer for the individual whistleblowers.
Right.
Because even in the US, where there's been reward systems for a very long time now, the proportion of whistleblowers who actually get financial reward is really, really tiny. It's like winning the lottery, and it's only in specific sectors. So for whistleblowing, it happens everywhere in every sector, and the nurse in a care home, well, she won't be able to get any financial rewards because there won't be a fine imposed on the care home that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so it's gotten. I'm saying financial reward it's a different topic, but at the very least, carrot in thanking the whistleblowers and in telling them you've done the right thing, and in telling your staff if you see something that's not quite right, you please tell us, and this is how you tell us, and we will protect you if you tell us. We won't, we won't punish you for it. We will say thank you instead. So I think that's very important. But also, yeah, of course you need the stick. I'm strong. I'm a lawyer. I believe in the rule of law. I strongly believe in accountability, and so if you don't have a stick, then you don't have any accountability. You see what I mean? You need to act when things go wrong, especially if you found that someone has been silencing other colleagues or have been punishing whistleblowers. Then I think it's really important to act and to show the rest of the staff that you've acted. Because there's nothing more dispiriting than there's no point in reporting wrongdoing because nothing will be done about it.
Nothing will happen.
Yeah. Well, why bother then? So I do think that you need both.
So one of my favorite questions to ask each of my guests as we're wrapping it up is, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? Well, we've talked a little bit about it already, the changing nature of the public interest. The fact that actually Gen Z is quite vocal and quite willing to, go for it and express themselves. And I speak about whistleblowing in a work context because the whistleblowing law only applies to workers. It's not members of the public. They're not covered by the UK whistleblowing law. I think what's really interesting with Gen Z is that they have a much healthier attitude to work and work-life balance in a way than maybe my parents' generation. And so they're far less willing to put up with something that they think is inappropriate because they don't think of their their life, their career as a career for life, and they're ready
Right.
to leave a particular employer and start elsewhere if they think that the first employer doesn't live through its value, doesn't align with their own personal value, and so on and so forth. So in a way that they're fearless in a way. I think that it's it certainly has changed, and that's, I think that's quite exciting,
Quite hopeful.
Yeah. And so also what gives me hope is that in the UK we have a new government. And,
yes, I was in the UK. I happened to be in the UK when those elections happened, and it was quite a joyful day.
Yeah, and the new government has promised some employment law reforms, and we very much hope for the UK whistleblowing law we very much hope that it's going to be updated, it's going to be improved, and we think there's a good opportunity now for it to take place, because it was past 25 years ago. The world of work has changed an awful lot since then, so it really needs to be updated.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. I've certainly learned a lot about whistleblowing. I suspect our audience has as well. And I encourage our audience again to listen to the TEDx talk. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight, Whistleblowing in the Digital Age. Sybille Raphael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Pam.